The receipt designer works. Let's go in. It's they're called document templates, and it works a little bit like sort of classic nav reports, where there are different sections, and then you can put data into the basically like rows in those sections. So if we look at our sort of standard one, it's just called receipt, and if I edit it, what you see is a bunch of lines where there's a section type and then a subtype, and then normally some kind of like replacement variable. And so what those variables are for each section are defined in the documentation. So they're different. Like, you know, %6 on page header is going to be different than %6 on a body. And you just have to you have to use the documentation to know. This is one of the areas that we're working on improving, so that, you know, it would have like a field lookup and all that kind of nice stuff like exists elsewhere. But for now, you use replacement variables and the documentation to figure out what the variables are for each section. So page header obviously runs once at the top of each page, and then header is going to contain the header information about the sale, and then body has individual lines for each line from the sale, and then there's item tracking information if there is item tracking defined. And you can see that each of these has actually a condition. So the item tracking lines, for example, will only print if a certain condition applies, and that would be that there's a serial number. I think that's what %1 is. So if a serial number exists, then print this line. Otherwise, it don't. So normally you won't get item tracking lines because there isn't a serial number. Then there's a footer where we have our totals. Then payment. So payment is a little bit different. Payment actually will then create basically like a subroutine that'll run the ChargeLogic payments receipt designer and actually pull in the receipt design from ChargeLogic payments. And I don't know if you're familiar with how that works, but let me just flip over to that for a minute. So if we go, it's actually per gateway. If we open up our gateways and go to payment tech, so then go to receipt designer, and there's a design per language, so we're going to edit that. And so for ChargeLogic payments, each gateway has its own receipt design, and you can go to set preview record, and so I don't have it. Let me pick a gateway where we probably actually have data. Loop back, receipt designer, edit, and set preview record. Yep, there we go. So I'm going to use this credit card charge. So when you do that, it'll then fill in sample data for you, so you can see what it'll actually look like. But what's important to know here is that there's a column called show on itemized receipt, and that's what the POS receipt is. So on the ChargeLogic payments receipt designer, any line where it's checked off show on itemized receipt, that's actually going to get inserted here. So where this payment line is, all the stuff from the credit card receipt is just going to get feathered in where it says payment. So and that's going to be the because we have to certify our receipts with the payment processors, so we have to show specific data. So at the POS, you can make the itemized receipt look like whatever you want to, but the credit card stuff has to be coming from the certified setups. So
I see.
So that's how that happens. And then there's a footer. There's that information which doesn't apply in the U.S. And then you can put loyalty information at the bottom that shows the current points and everything. So,
Okay. Okay, so you have to read the document to understand what's the percent.
You do, yeah. You have to read. Yep, you have to read the documentation exactly. So let me see if I can figure out how to print one that you can see on screen. Not the greatest, but that's basically what it's.
Okay.
So when it prints on the receipt printer, it looks more like a retail receipt. Things are sort of laid out better. This is using a nav report that's driven off of that setup. So, it uses the same setup no matter which way it prints, whether it prints off of the report or just printing directly to the printer.
Let's see. So, yesterday I asked a question about the label. So I think that you can do similar, like a print on a label. Just use this receipt designer to print on a label, but the key is that is it possible to print that when you close the sale, then it's possible you print kind of two reports to two different
printers. Yes, exactly, and that's what we're about to get to. Okay. So close these extra windows here, and okay. So we have lots of different document templates defined. Like we have a customer credit card receipt and a declined credit card receipt, and one where there's a tender operation, like when you remove cash from the drawer, it'll print a receipt for that. And then we have an X report and a Z report that prints the daily totals. So then if we go back to our setup here, there is now, let's see, POS. It is receipt or document selection, I think. I always have trouble finding things in these menus. Center type, customer. Report selections. Yeah, POS report selections. So for each usage, like receipt, you can define what's going to print. And so, yes, if you wanted then to print something out of a label printer, you can just add
another line here.
So this works just like with, order and invoice prints, where you can define a list of things that get printed. This is a little bit has a little bit more functionality because we have not just a report ID, but also a document template that can get passed into that report if it's the special report that prints the receipts. And then we also have email templates. So if you have an email template for the document, then it will also show up here. So that's how we do our emailed receipts. And then the other options are used for first print, used for reprint. So, if you were reprinting a receipt that you didn't necessarily want to reprint the label, you could do that as well.
Okay.
So there are usages for all different kinds of documents here, including things like, printing a customer credit card and, whatever else. So,
Got it.
So that's sort of the basics of the receipt designer and then how to select which receipt actually prints. So, you can have as many receipt designs as you want, and then you just use this to set it up. So there's a store code in here as well, so you can have different receipt templates for different stores if you want to. Yeah. So, it'll of course pull the store address and everything off of the store card, but, if you wanted some special information to print on, one store versus another, you can just use a different layout.
Okay.